Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce you to my guest today, Steve Kahan. Steve has successfully helped to grow 6 startup companies from early stage development to going public or being sold, resulting in more than $3 billion in shareholder value. He is currently the Chief Marketing Officer at Thycotic, which will become the 7th startup that he has worked with. Steve inspires teams and their organizations to take on the impossible and succeed. He has just written a book published by Wiley and Audible and available on Amazon.com called Be a Startup Superstar. The book teaches those graduating college and young professionals how to earn a great living doing what they love by igniting their career at a tech startup. So welcome, Steve.
Tammy, it is great to be with you.
Thank you for joining us from your home office in Texas. What part of Texas are you in, Steve?
Sugar Land, Texas.
Sugar Land. Oh, that sounds so delightful. And we are talking today on Super Tuesday, even though we will air this episode by the time this episode airs, we will know what happened on Super Tuesday. But right now, mystery is in the air. So this is a podcast about all the twists and turns and the kinds of things that people do with their careers. And a lot of what you've done with your career has also, you've engaged with a lot of companies where you never know what's going to happen. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us about your early days at the beginning, probably even before you got involved with startups. What were the early days like for you?
Right. So if we take a step back, what I found was that, at least for me, is that the traditional path from school to climbing the corporate ladder could not only feel high risk for my career, it almost in many ways felt like a death trap.
Ooh.
And I remember my parents, and in particular my father, used to tell me so many times when I was growing up, he'd say, Steve, get your degree, go to work for a large corporation, you work hard, they'll take care of you, and you'll have a great career. And then, of course, he would follow up, he would say, of course, your mother and I much prefer that you become a doctor or a lawyer. But short of that, getting a job at a big company will do. So that was the path I took. So I graduated college. I got a job at a large company processing claims. And I remember staring at the pile of claims I was supposed to process that day and looking at my bank statement. And I was once again down to $50 in my bank account. And the student loans would grab a hold of my paychecks before they'd ever even get a chance to hit my bank. And I remember I was thinking, how on earth am I ever going to get ahead? And I would just work long hours and yet my situation would never change. And so on one fateful day, I asked a question, and that question was, how could I earn a great living doing what I love? And I realized that it wasn't going to be at that large, big company continuing to process claims, that I wanted to make the leap into the startup world. And so I very early on made that decision and made that leap. And I've never looked back many, many years ago.
Steve, can we unpack that a little bit more? Because I noticed that when people tell their story, it all sounds like kind of oh, I just woke up one morning and said, hey, I think I'll go into the startup world. But so what did you major in college, and how did that get you into that role of processing claims? Was it a large insurance company? Were you processing those kinds of claims?
Yeah, it was. So for me, I did not go to college to get some sort of advanced biology degree or even a law degree, as maybe I should have. But I actually was a communications major.
Oh,
And so for me, I was thrilled to get a job processing claims right out of college for a very large organization, and was ready to set the world on fire. But turns out that I'm sort of an entrepreneurial lot, and someone that really likes to work with a small team of crazies that are hell bent on changing the world. And safe to say that that's typically not what you'll find in claims processing departments at large insurance companies. And so I knew that I had to make that leap. And for me, I made the leap into the technology startup world. And I've had the opportunity to have a great career within technology, mostly cybersecurity. And interestingly enough, I can't code a single item code for the life of me, and yet have been able to carve out an amazingly successful career, which shows really that how startups can offer great opportunities independent of what your background is, because there's so many opportunities in virtually every functional area.
so tell us a little bit how you made that first initial leap. How did you even know to go from where you were in this large company to a startup? What sparked your interest? Where did you even how did you set your sights on that? How did you know what to do?
Yeah, so I didn't. I do now,
Yeah.
but I didn't then. And
Yeah.
so for me, I started to do some research of startups, and I found a startup in particular that was very, very young and in its infancy. I knew I wanted to work in marketing. I would do anything to learn, and I knew very little about marketing at that time. And so, what I did some research and found a company that was focused on changing the way applications were being developed. And I just proactively contacted their senior executives and was a persistent little bugger, and found my way to get an interview, and kind of made all the mistakes in the world that I could teach others not to. I remember when I first started, I'll never forget looking in the office next to mine, and there were people unplugging the copy machine, putting it on a dolly. This is on my first day, and literally rolling it right out of the office. And I came to find out a few days later it was because the company could no longer afford to pay for that copy machine. But I was blind to it. I was so pumped and excited to work with that small team that just knew that would change the way applications were being developed. And for me, I was so excited to have the opportunity to build my skills in marketing, particularly for this company, because I was the only one doing it. So if it was going to get done from a marketing perspective, it would be done by me. And it was amazing. So I had the opportunity to learn everything. I just was like a sponge, and I read everything I could, went to every show, would contact others that achieved the success that I was looking to achieve. And 3.5 years later, that company went public,
Wow.
and I got the bug and never left the startup world.
So from the insurance company, you started, it sounds like, with the idea of I don't really know what I'm looking for, but you started with something you loved or something you liked, marketing. And that kind of became your, let's say, touch point, so to speak. And then you started doing some research based on that in terms of, well, I'll start with you had the communications degree. Was that kind of a place you built from, would you say? Is that
Well,
how it
it
worked? Or-
is. And what I've learned now, and what I would share with your listeners, so that story might be interesting, but that's really a story of how not to do it.
Okay.
And so, what I would like to offer up a story, a little bit more concrete value for those listening today, is what should you look for to separate a great startup versus a startup that might be highly risky.
Ah,
And so, what I've learned now, I guess if it was just one or two startups, maybe I'd be lucky that have had great exits. But for me, it's six going now. It should be seven with the current company that I'm at.
right.
And here's what I look for now if I were to choose a startup. The first criteria I would look for is quality people. And this is so important because people reflect a company's culture. So if you don't think you could respect, trust, and admire the people, move on. And what you're looking for in particular is a solid management team of leaders who rock your world. And so I look for that, number one.
How do you find that though, Steve? How do you even know to spot that? You say that now, right? You're into your seventh company. But like you said, back then, right?
Right.
You walked into this company, you were bright-eyed, you were young, they were carrying the copier out the door and you were still excited and bright-eyed, had no idea, and but you weren't looking for those things at the time.
No, no, no. So I wasn't. So this was a big time mistake. So what you would want to do is to understand the company's mission, its value statements, if they've defined them, to make sure that you align with those and your own personal values. Research what the CEOs and other leaders are saying, read their blog posts, take a look at their backgrounds, their ability to inspire and influence you. And here's a question you can ask if you're interviewing that will be so insightful. And it would be this question that would help you to better understand the values is if you weren't building your startup, what would you be doing?
Yeah.
If you ask that very simple question, it opens it up to help you really start to understand the person, the people that you're meeting with, and get a sense for is this someone that I would like having a beer with, for example? Or
Yeah.
do we share common interests or hobbies? Or is this person, someone that's going to give me the freedom to succeed just based upon the answer that they are giving you versus someone who is going to pigeonhole you into a role and micromanage you, for example?
Yeah.
And so that's an example of a question and some of the things that I look for in that criteria.
Yeah. So, I love that question. I think it's a great kind of litmus test. And, even for a young person just starting out, they could relate to thinking about, well, is this someone I'd want to sit down and have a beer with? And would that be a question, or the answer to that question, would that resonate with me? Because you think about a young person, they may not even know exactly what values they're looking for yet, right? So,
Right. And a
yeah.
little bit you're looking in terms of inspiration and motivation and intelligence, obviously.
Yes.
So intelligence around, is this someone like super smart, just an A+ player where it's like, gee, I could learn so much. And then the importance about inspiration and motivation is that ultimately, typically the management team is helping with sales or it's helping hire other people as well. And you want to make sure that these people are capable of hiring A+ people that you might surround yourself with.
Mhm. Mhm.
Second thing I look for is a concept that fills a big market need.
Mhm.
And here, particularly in the B2B world, what you'll find is that customers don't spend money on nice to solve problems, they spend money on must solve problems. No matter what company you're in, there's always a limited budget, and the nice to solves get sort of written off quickly. And here, there's so much data that's available online that influencers and analysts are saying about the market, about the space and its size. And don't be afraid, by the way, if you see that there's lots of competition. Maybe be a little concerned if you see there's no competition because that suggests that perhaps there isn't a real market.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
A
Yeah.
couple of other things I look for is
Yeah.
next is a great product that I could believe in. And
Yes.
here it's doing detailed research. And first of all, I like to see if the product or service, whatever it might be, that it resonates with me. Do I believe in it? Would I purchase? Would I recommend it? Would I use it? Can I go to work every day with a passion for what the company creates, and in particular, my role or your role in creating it? So if you can't get behind it with enthusiasm, then it's not the right place for you. And finally, I look to see if the startup is well funded. And so naturally, you want to choose a startup that has a long enough runway to get off the ground. And so, what you want to be able to do is to ask questions to ensure that the startup itself is properly capitalized so you have the best chance for growth and stability. So, over many years, those are the criteria that I look for, and I make sure the very best I can that all of those criteria boxes are checked.
Yeah. So now, and those are big boxes, and I assume that there are maybe some smaller boxes or checklists under each of those boxes. So I'm curious, with regard to, for example, a company that's well funded. Where do you look for the information, or and you don't have to give me every specific, but how do you make the determination of um, that a company is well funded? What if your background isn't in finance, or you're 22, you're fresh out of school, you don't know what a well funded company looks like. You have no
Right.
idea.
So here's two
Yeah,
questions that person, if you will, can ask that will help give them a better sense.
yeah,
Right? Because there's no right or wrong answer to that,
mhm,
because
yeah,
each business is unique in terms of its own model, its expense structure, the money raised, etc. But here are two questions you could ask. First, how much has the company raised and what's its runway? Right? It's just very clear, right to the point. And of course, sometimes people are not sure what I mean by runway, but runway basically is assuming that revenue numbers are hit and the expenses or burn rate continues. When will you run out of money? That's what's known as runway.
mhm,
And a second question is, who are your investors and why did you choose them? Right. So the answer to both of those, and you might ask a couple of different people just to see like if it all adds up. Right. And
yeah,
so those are questions that you could ask. Another one as well is uh, tell me a little bit about what growth will look like in the next year. Right. So there you're sort of asking a question that will give you a sense of how well thought through their sales projections are, so that you could see that they actually have a solid chance for hitting the numbers that they project. So again, here's just a few questions you could ask,
yep,
and then make an assessment. Maybe take good notes. You'll remember what they say. Share that information with a mentor, and try to get some validation that the answers pass the sniff test.
yes.
And I think if you ask those questions, they'll put you in a much better shot at selecting the right startup.
So I'm loving the tips that you're offering here, Steve, and the questions, the open-ended questions, the very thoughtful kinds of questions that anyone could be asking in an interview, or in a let's say informational interview, any kind of part of their research, that they could get this information and help them to really size things up to see, is this the kind of situation that I want to consider getting myself into. um,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
another benefit of asking these questions is these are very straightforward questions, but they're 301 level questions in that the simple fact that you're asking them will differentiate you from virtually everybody else,
Yeah.
because others won't even think about asking.
Right.
And then the management team person that you are likely interviewing with will walk away saying, "Gee, that didn't expect those. That person's sharp."
Yeah. 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 Definitely. And you want them to appreciate that you asked those questions, right? So I'm curious. So you're on company number 7, um, and I'm curious to know, at how many companies did you work for before you arrived at some of these questions or these benchmarks that you're talking about? So, because I'm assuming that you didn't come up with these overnight.
No, this is unfortunately lifelong learning. I
Yeah,
wish
it sounds like lifelong learning. Yeah.
that someone would have helped me with those questions, or I would have even been smart enough to ask questions that maybe I would have been able to learn these answers earlier in my career. And so it wasn't really any epiphany.
Yeah.
It's just learning along the way of, in this case, what goes into making a successful startup. Because what you'll find is that most CEOs, they've got a good story,
Mm,
right? But it can be challenging separating those that have a good story versus those that have a good story and a good chance for success,
yes.
right? And so unfortunately, I wish I would have known this in my early 20s, these questions, but I know them now, and it's why I share them with others as much as I can,
Yeah.
because I want to pay it forward.
So let me ask you your own question now. So if you were not doing this now, what would you be doing?
Well, what I'll tell you, I'm actually not waiting. So I mean, I'm doing tons of things, and so I have always been kind of a little bit of a workaholic for most of my life, and what I learned early on is how to about midway is how to better manage my own schedule so that I could really have a better, what I like to call, work life harmony, which is kind of managing, I guess, that balance. There is no right or wrong answer, by the way. But what I am doing are the things I've always wanted to do. So, for example, I spend a lot of time paddleboarding, vacationing with my wife. I've taught myself to play guitar. I'm taking pilot's lessons to learn how to fly Cessna right now as we speak. And then focusing on helping a lot of young professionals after just writing my book is really a big passion of mine, which is, of course, why I'm here today.
Yeah. And I know that you've been speaking at a lot of colleges and universities, giving talks about your book and trying to help um, young people just starting out so that hopefully they can have, benefit from some of these insights so that when they're launching, perhaps they can step into some of these situations with the benefit of those insights and perhaps dodge a few mistakes. But as you learned all along the way. We all learn from mistakes. We can't dodge all of those mistakes. I'm curious, um, over the years, as you moved through all these different companies, would you say that there were certain areas of learning that you would say you learned over and over again? I don't mean that they were necessarily the same learnings or mistakes, but that there were maybe certain nuances that you had to really stay on top of as you move from one company to the next.
Yeah, I think that there are. I mean, this is like a question I get many, many times speaking to young professionals. And so I guess the first thing that I like to say is that the world pays the most for deep knowledge in one area. And so for me, that has been the world of marketing. And so marketing has changed, safe to say, in the last 30 years and even in the last few years, a lot.
Yeah.
For example, it now, from a marketing perspective, it's very financial, right? And so you've got to be totally up on the key metrics that contribute to pipeline and revenue every step of the way. I mean, you're almost in finance and sales, even though you're in marketing, right? And so you've got to, before you go build your general set of knowledge, focus on building deep knowledge in one area and realize that that is a constant learning, right? And so just when you think you've got it all figured out, you actually realize how much you don't know.
And as they say, change is the only constant. So if you don't stay sort of in tune with that, you're going to miss something along the way. So,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I've also learned that you have got to surround yourself with A plus talent, right? And this is so important. Actually, uh, very recently, Jack Welch just passed away,
Yes.
unfortunately, the former CEO of General Electric, and he had it right. And he said that nothing matters more to winning than surrounding yourself with A plus talent.
Yeah.
And what's a type of A plus talent you need around you to bring out the best that you have to offer? And many people, they don't actually think about that and define that, and then actually think about that when they're making career choices or building their team.
Mm.
It's not just the roles. It's, for example, as I mentioned, marketing is very financial.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not a financial sort of whiz, you better surround yourself with people who are,
Yeah.
right? And so that's an example of that. And then even things like realizing that everything can't be a high priority. And high performers, as I saw myself to be, tend to take on massive workloads. And this is part of the DNA of hardworking people. And it's actually a trait that I respect, but it could cause a lot of stress and burnout over the long haul. And so, what you really want to realize is that success isn't about necessarily how much you do. Success is about performing the right actions toward the right goals that will create the biggest impact. So, the key is a shift in your mindset to that way of thinking.
Mm. I like that. Yeah. And and so as you've developed your own self over all this time through these different companies, um, how how have you what are some of the keys that you've used to make sure you surround yourself with A plus talent? What have you
Well,
what have you looked for?
what I look for in people, so I think that is very much dependent on obviously the person or the situation. So I'm going to cover that a little bit more generically but in terms of what makes an A plus person, particularly at a startup company, really anywhere. And so, first of all, I look for people who embrace accountability to get things done.
Mm.
Right. And so in startups in particular, you tend to have smaller teams. There is no place to hide. Right.
Mm.
And sometimes in the big bureaucratic organizations, there's a lot of people hiding.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but not in startups, you can't. I also look for people who communicate in smart, confident, and respectful ways. And in particular, it catches my eye those who tend to ask as many questions as they do focus on communicating. I look for people who are not I people. And by I people, I mean those are the people you'll see them, and those are the people that take all the credit.
Right.
I look for the we people. These are the people who want to share the credit, who tend to work well on teams. someone who's prepared to work hard because there's no easy button.
Yeah.
And then I like, for myself, someone who pays attention to the details, because I do.
Yeah.
And I realize that oftentimes the difference between an A result and a B plus is in the details, and those often get overlooked. And then finally, I look for someone that has both persistence and tenacity. In the startup world, you are going up against bigger, better funded competitors that seemingly have all the advantages. And so you can't be someone that runs into an obstacle and then blows it into a major mountain. And then someone who has the tenacity to realize that there are going to be obstacles along the way and that you don't get thrown by them
Mm.
or quit something too early, right? That you will really focus on seeing things through. There's great joy in that as well. So those to me are some of the attributes that I think go into making someone A plus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, and I'm thinking about what you're talking about here with startups, and that most of your career has been in the technology arena, but really a lot of what you're talking about are great attributes really in any organization. Um,
They really are. I mean,
yeah,
my expertise is startups, but it's interesting. We partner right now with some of the biggest corporations in the world, partnerships that I set up.
yeah,
And it's so interesting to me when I get into conversations with some of the people at these large corporations that they'll start out by apologizing for their bureaucracy.
hmm,
Yet they accept that status quo and feel that they're helpless to change it.
mm,
And I also think about the CEOs at those companies, although I've not met them because they're huge companies, that probably if they had a magic wand, they would probably wish for that their employees for one day would act more like a startup. It would make such a big difference for shareholder value.
yeah,
And so these are not exclusive to startups at all.
no,
But certainly in the startup world, if you like to move fast, if you like uh, entrepreneurial innovation, and you want to be a speedboat darting around those big ships, then it's the right place for you.
yeah. I was also reflecting on what you were talking about in terms of not being the person who doesn't always use talk in I's but talks in we's. I think about the something I talk to people about all the time about being an entrepreneur in your own career and thinking about your own career that way. And um, because we live in a time where nothing really is all that secure anyway, even in the larger companies. And I think that if we think about ourselves as offering value towards some greater good rather than always worrying about what's in it for me, we're going to be able to bring out the best in ourselves no matter what we do.
I totally agree. And I will take it even a step further. I think today, in my view, and it's something that I've always paid a lot of attention to, is there seems to be a lack of gratitude in the workplace today. And it's amazing when people don't feel that they are sort of being recognized or perhaps respected, that a lot of times people leave for that. And, it's so easy to express gratitude. And even if you're not getting it, you could be the one to start it, and it's contagious. For example, saying thank you all the time, whether that's an email, whether you're in a virtual meeting, whether you're with people face to face, a good pat on the back. Um, it's contagious. And they're sending a little thank you note to someone. I mean, how rare, unfortunately, in the workplace today.
Yeah.
And I think that that as well could really, in many ways, change or lead the culture, particularly in startups because they're smaller, and you could be the change agent. You could be the one to start it. And even if you don't get it back, keep on doing it
Yeah.
because it will catch on.
Yeah.
And and it's those work environments where people are saying please and thank you and recognizing others and sharing credit, and those are the organizations that people tend to kind of enjoy working for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
something you can start at any point in your career at
Mm-hmm.
any company.
Yes, I'll add to that and say that it helps when you thank somebody to let them know what impact their actions had on the benefit of some of a project or some on someone else, because then people realize that they are adding value and that it makes a difference, and that has a direct impact on people's intrinsic motivation far more than giving someone a raise or doing a lot of other kinds of things that people often assume are going to motivate people.
It's so
Um,
important what you
yeah,
just said. It's
yeah,
sort of linking the why
yes,
to the expression of gratitude. And that is also important when you're setting objectives.
mhm,
So often in teams, and this is something I try to pay a lot of attention to, and it's important in startups because they're small companies. But when you're, for example, we do quarterly planning and we'll set up quarterly objectives. And I will make sure with my team that they understand the whys behind the objectives, and then in particular breaking it down into people's roles. So you might be able to, in our case, say like, look, we've got to help generate this amount of pipeline. Here's why it's so important, and not just some high level description why, but breaking it down into how it actually plays into the overall revenue picture for the family, for the company,
right.
and then breaking it down into the various roles, how individuals contribute to this. And again, someone might say, listening to this, saying, "Well, okay, well, you're C-level person who's doing this." Well, let's say that you have objectives that you have been given, as an example, and you don't really understand the whys behind the importance of them. Ask,
Yes,
right? And so, and if you don't get a sufficient answer, maybe they're the wrong objectives, and then you ought to ask those questions, right? And so, these are things you could do. You could start to build those good habits right now, no matter what level you are in an organization.
absolutely. And, I think oftentimes people are afraid to ask because they think it makes them look like they don't know what they're doing. But I think there are ways to ask those questions that can show that they're being thoughtful and they're on top of it. But I'm hoping people will listen to what you're saying here, Steve, so they will start to take charge not only of their own careers, but also to be able to be a greater contributor within their own organizations.
The result of which will be greater professional success, personal success, and financial success. I can assure you.
Yeah. I think oftentimes, if we can kind of almost get out of our own way, we can do so much more. Yeah. So what's next for you? What's coming down the pike for you?
Well, continuing to build Thycotic, we've gone from 6 million in revenue 4 years ago to over 100 million now. So to continue to build our company, as I mentioned, I want to get my pilot's license, but then
Aha.
also I want to become the very best grandpapa, I guess, if you will,
Ah,
grandfather to my two grandchildren. So that's super important to me.
wonderful. Wonderful. Well, that sounds like a lot to look forward to.
It is.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for being here today. You've offered so much to the listeners in terms of how they can engage in startups, and lots of different kinds of organizations. I want to make sure that people can find you. What's the best way for them to find you?
So the best way to find me is through my book's website. The book is called Be a Startup Superstar, and you can reach me at www.beastartupsuperstar.com. And just so your listeners to know, should they have interest in the book, I get a lot of people commenting or asking questions of me directly, and I respond to every one of them.
Wow. Well, thank you. And all of that will be in the show notes. So people will have no trouble finding you. And I want to thank you so much for being here today. This has been really interesting, and so much that people can learn. And I'm just thinking about my daughter who just started working for a startup. So I'm definitely going to get your book for her. So
I wish her great success.
thank you. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Steve Kahan. It was so interesting to speak with him and learn about his professional path to where he is today. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? Is there something you'll put into action that you'll benefit from for years to come? Share what resonated with you in the show notes at workfromtheinsideout.com. Look for episode 069. That's also where you'll find all the links and resources from today's podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Steve, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at www.tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button or follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows, maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.